No, it's interesting that you say that this is something people should do just to take care of their bodies in general. And we often think of taking care of our bodies meaning exercise. And yet a lot of athletes, especially athletes, you work with the swim team, the U.S. synchronized swim team.
Correct.
A lot of athletes really benefit from Rolfing. Tell us a little bit about your experience with the swim team.
Well, my experience was from 2002 through 2004, and it was a very honor and pleasure to work with those athletes. Athletes are incredible people to work with. They're very focused. They work their bodies really hard. They have, in this case, repetitive motion patterns of a particular sport that they have problems with, and so we just try to keep them kind of tuned up, so to speak, so that they can perform at their highest peak. Athletes from all walks of life, professional dancers, people who use their bodies very vigorously benefit well because it does allow them to stay at that peak performance, to use their bodies as they need to compete at the level they do for their sport.
So athletes benefit from Rolfing, not just because they've had injuries, but because, explain exactly, because you talked about, when you mentioned at the cellular level, I'm not sure what that means. Explain that in a little more detail.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about fascia and how it can contract and kind of hold patterns in the body. Let's say that fascia starts to contract around your diaphragm in your pleural space, around your lungs. Maybe on one side more than another. It starts to tighten and compact this whole side of your thorax, potentially, if it's the left side.
Is that something you really feel? You're probably not even aware of it.
You can feel it in your body, but it's a subtle feeling sometimes. It's sort of like, I just can't move my body as well on this side. I don't know what that's about. And as we start to investigate into somebody's body to find out what's going on there, we're looking at how they use their body in posture, or if they're an extreme athlete, or they've had an injury. But that tissue compression then starts to affect the cells at the level and stagnate the cells so they don't move as well, and they can't work on their sort of individual basis. It creates a lethargy actually at the cellular level, so that maybe they can't get enough hydration and fluid. They can't do the intercell communication that takes place for well-being at that level. And then at the worst end of the spectrum, I mean, you can have just aches and pains, but you can have actually disease build up from this lethargy that happens at that level. So that kind of takes it down to the microcosmic kind of notion of what happens at the cell level without getting real detailed about.
Didn't Ida Rolf also, she developed certain movements that you could do yourself as well as go to a professional Rolfer and get Rolfed. Describe those movements, because as you were talking about the fascia contracting, it does seem like that there should be some movements you could do.
Right. Well, she was also very interested in Ashtanga yoga, and
it does seem like a lot of the topics we've talked about on this show, yoga and massage, are all go very well with how you're describing Rolfing.
Right. They all dovetail and they all have relevance to one another because they're all working towards the same goal, which is improving the general health of the body. So her notion of yoga, but she was also interested in movement. She was a personal friend of Moshe Feldenkrais. And
we talked about that on this show too.
Good, right. And she was also interested in Alexander technique. And Matthias Alexander was an actor and in theater. And this notion of how we move in our bodies and how we flow has to do with how freed up things are or how contracted things are. So if you're in a contracted state, you have a harder time moving as fluidly and as gracefully as you'd like to. And that inhibits, again, the cellular health. But that's her notion was that yes, you can do movements, you can work on postural adjustments. You know, you can walk across the room more gracefully, and we might have to walk across the room and think about, okay, maybe you walk this way right now because of how your body is contracted. But if we start to open the tissues, then we have to kind of re-educate how somebody walks across the room.
When you go to a Rolfer, do they teach you those movements as well as go through the Rolfing sessions?
Yes, that's part of the package. We work on postural adjustment.
So you really observe people,
yes.
and you give them advice based on those observations. How much does Rolfing cost?
Well, it depends on the community you're in. It can cost anywhere from around $100 to $200 a session, and that can last from around an hour's worth of time to around an hour and a half worth of time.
And do you need a minimum number of sessions to be of any benefit?
Well, Ida set it up as a recipe of 10 sessions. 10 is just sort of this mythological number. A lot can happen in 10 sessions, and we don't like to mislead people about how much can happen. Of course, we hope that as much can happen in 10 sessions as possible, but sometimes if you've got long-term issues that are pretty deep in the system, it might take quite a long time to work with somebody, which would mean the first time, for example, I went to get Rolfed because of my traumas and stuff and the patterns that were so deep from my marathon running. It took 25 sessions.
How do you find a Rolfer?
There's a website you can go to, www.rolf.org, and you can find a Rolfer anywhere in the world. You just look for finding one on the website.
You just let them know where you live, and
let
it will
them know
let
where
you
you
know
live.
that where the closest Rolfer is.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Thanks so
You're
much.
welcome.
I want to thank our guest Michael Loukas for upcoming. Episodes. Viewer feedback and links to important information on health. Log on to our website at the address that appears on your screen. Thanks for joining us on Health Vision, a production of the WOUB Center for Public Media.